Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our virtual Meet the Expert session. My name is David and I am part of the My World of Work Live team with Skills Development Scotland. My World of Work Live is about helping you to understand what jobs in Scotland are going to require in the future and also to help you get the skills you need for them. In today's session, we're going to cover a quick overview of the oil and gas sector. We're going to look at the opportunities within the sector. I'm going to introduce you to our expert for today, Sakshi Sircar, and allow you the opportunity to ask any questions. I would encourage you to get involved as much as possible, so please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to ask us questions. As we go through it, we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. I would just like to let you know that today's session is being recorded so that young people who could not make it today can still access the resources. It will be available for everyone to watch on the My World of Work Live playlist on the My World of Work YouTube channel. This means that you can go back and rewatch everything that's been talked about today. If you're feeling a little bit shy, don't worry, everything you ask today can be anonymous and you can select that option in the question and answer box. So just before I introduce you to today's expert, let's have a look at some of the labour market information. So the average UK salary stands at about 43,160. 60% of people are employed full-time in the sector. Entry routes are often through college, university, modern apprenticeship and graduate apprenticeship. If you're in school, you can also do a foundation apprenticeship alongside your standard subjects and engineering skills. Generally, women are underrepresented in the engineering sector, and it's something that the engineering sector is actively trying to address. So what I would like to do now is introduce you to our expert for today, Sakshi Sircar, who is a project engineer. She's worked as an engineer for about 10 years and has worked in oil and gas in a variety of roles. In her spare time, she works as a mentor for a youth support organisation, and she loves to travel, garden, practice aerial silks and martial arts. Things that Sakshi thought would be interesting for young people watching today would be the transition of the type of energy we're going to be using on a daily basis, the use of robotics in the industry, and the value that individuals can have on climate change. So with that in mind, I would just like to hand over to Sakshi and just let you tell us a wee bit about yourself.
Hi everyone. So that was a really great introduction. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I studied mechanical engineering at uni. I went to Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen and graduated with a master's. And then I went on to get a graduate job for ConocoPhillips. I worked there for about 7-8 years. Had lots of different roles, lots of different things to do with engineering, but I also did a little bit of like operational excellence, which is a bit more to do with like the business operation side of things. I then actually had a bit of a career break, so I had a year off work where I did a bit of traveling and did some charity work, and then I came back and I went back into oil and gas, but with a slightly different viewpoint. I wanted to work in a bit more to do with the wider energy sector and talk a bit, sort of learn and talk and understand a bit more about how we can make our energy usage more sustainable and what the future looks like as well in terms of not just oil and gas but also other engineering and energy sectors.
Excellent. So what we'll do is we'll just jump straight in with some questions then. So just to start off and give the young people watching an idea, what does an average day look like for you?
An average day, so every day for me is very different sometimes. As you know, I've worked for OGTC and we're working with a lot of technology developers that are developing technologies to sort of drive transition of energy, the type of energy we're using, trying to lower the carbon footprint or lower emissions of the energy and industry sector. So each day is quite varied and I really enjoy that. I attend a lot of sort of virtual conferences and webinars. I've been at recently. I work a lot one-to-one with the people who are developing the technology to understand their projects and see how OGT people in my organization or me myself, I can support them. I work closely with the finance team as well because we are basically like a funding organization. So we provide funding to the technology developers. So I have to work closely with, how much money the developers are spending, and are they on track? Are they producing the amount of work that they said they would, and things like that. So yeah, it's super varied, but I really like it. I've also started, kicked off a sustainability team in OGTC. So we're looking at actually what impact we're making as an organization ourselves, and what our carbon emissions look like as well. Which is also very cool.
That is very cool. I'm actually just wondering, so you're talking about the energy transition, and I know what that means and you know what that means, but would you be able to just give us a sort of overview of what the energy transition actually means, and what the OGTC's role in it is, just so to make it clear for the people watching?
Yeah, sure. So the energy transition essentially means that right now we use a lot of oil and gas that provides us energy in the sense for our heating, our running electricity, having hot water, how we fuel our cars, the buses. Aside, and that's just one layer of how we use oil and gas. There's also the layer of oil and gas where we use it for manufacturing and materials and things like that. So the energy transition is looking at how we use this source of energy, which is oil and gas, but we move away from it a bit more and use other different sources of energy. So we've got hydrogen or wind power or solar power, and things that are a bit more sustainable for the environment, so they don't damage the environment. So a lot, everyone will probably know that fossil fuels and oil and gas it's not so great. It's not infinite, it's finite. So there is a point where we're going to run out of it and we can't replace it. So we need to figure out some other resource which is nicer or more compatible with the environment and isn't necessarily going to run out in X amount of years as well. So that's what the energy transition is. So we're just trying to lower our reliance to do with oil and gas. We can't cut oil and gas out completely, but we can certainly reduce our reliance on it drastically, and perhaps use other things. And what OGTC is doing is we are a lot of the stuff that we're doing is looking at, okay, the impact that the oil and gas industry was making. How can we lower that impact? So can we create more efficiencies in the way that oil and gas is run, the industry is run? Can we create better technologies, or can we put robots out in the field, so that humans don't have to go and put themselves in unsafe environments, and they can maybe stay onshore or do things remotely? And then we're also looking at how other energies have been developed and what we can do to support them and accelerate that to get to a point where we are lowering our reliance on oil and gas, basically.
Excellent. And I think we'll be coming back with a question about robots later on, because that caught my interest. But for the moment, I've got a question here, which is what sparked your interest in the industry? What is it that motivated you to get involved the way you've got involved?
Yeah. So my first step into the industry was not very super interesting, in the sense that when I graduated from uni, there were a lot of jobs in the energy industry, and that was kind of like a nice way for me to get into it. But what I've really come to enjoy about it is the fact that we use energy, or we use resources for everything in our lives. And I am now part of, an integral part of doing something about that. So I started off working in oil and gas, which is something that we, you and I and everyone use all the time, and everything you see around you will have some sort of influence by oil and gas, basically. And now I'm part of an organization that's looking to see what else can be used other than just oil and gas. So that's really interesting and exciting for me.
Excellent. So I've got another question here, which is what sort of projects are you involved in, obviously towards this kind of aim? Is there anything that you're particularly proud of that you're working on?
Yeah. So we've got a couple of really cool projects going on just now. So in OGTC, I'm actually working specifically in the team that's called, Offshore Energy 4.0. So we're looking at technologies that can be deployed to the offshore energy sector. So basically not necessarily on the land. But we're also looking at land, to be fair, so I shouldn't say that outright. But yeah, so some of the projects that we're looking at the moment is, so I'm also specifically working across, like, there's a little work stream called Robotics and Autonomous Systems, and then there's a bit to do with digitalization. So we've got projects that are looking at, for example, there's one project that's looking at can we get subsea swarm robotics out in the field, which sounds really cool and future, like, advanced cool. But essentially it's looking at, okay, you know, like, really future blue sky thinking, can we have robots that, you know, are quite small, but there's maybe a whole bunch of them that work collaboratively, work together, and they can go out, you know, swim out to sea. You can deploy them from land, you can send them out, they know what mission they need to do, they go off and do their mission, whether it's just taking a video of something, or maybe they have some sensors that they put onto, like, a structure, or maybe they just need to go do some, like, marine research and, you know, watch something and come back. Can these developers came with this idea, can they develop that and bring, you know, accelerate that part of the industry, instead of, you know, going off in a big boat or a big ship, you're basically just sitting in land, deploying these small robots that can go off and do their thing and come back. So, which I think is really cool to think about. That could actually be a thing in the next, you know, 10 years or less.
That is pretty cool. I really like the sound of that. I've got a question here, which is, what is the most enjoyable part of your current job, and what is the part of your job that you don't like the most? We've all got parts we like and don't like, so.
So my role is a project engineer, and I really like that. It's quite like a multifaceted role. So I like the fact that I do lots of different things. As you know, as a project engineer, you do things to do with finance, you do things to do with technical development, you do things to do with future thinking, or managing people, or etc. So there's quite a few things to be able to do, and I really like that part of the job. And I like OGTC, and what I'm doing just now is because we're looking a lot to do with sustainability, which I'm really enjoying, and it's something I've always wanted to do. So, and I've been, you know, I feel empowered to be able to do quite a lot about that within the organization, which is really good. What I don't like is that specifically right now, so I joined the job last year when we were in lockdown. So I've actually had to meet my team in real life. Which I think is really weird, and I'm coming to terms with it now, but it was not something I fully enjoyed. I'm kind of like a person that needs to kind of, I like meeting the team, I like meeting people, so that's perhaps part of what I'm not quite enjoying, but coming to terms with.
No, that makes perfect sense. As a people person, it's good to meet people face to face and get to know them. So I can completely understand that. So I've got a question here, which is, in order to do the job, would I need to go to university? Could I do it as an apprenticeship?
I would say most definitely yes. University is not necessarily the answer. You might have a different way of arriving to the job that I'm doing now, but you can certainly get there. There's no limitations on that front. It just depends what you're interested in, and yeah, how you kind of make your path going forward.
Excellent. So obviously you've got a wealth of experience having worked in the roles you've worked in. What sort of, if somebody is in school right now and they're interested in working the sort of role you're in, what sort of subjects would you say they should be looking at using in school or doing in school?
So I think STEM subjects, so the science, technology, engineering, and maths. So I would say maths is quite important. If you were to pick one, not just in my job, if you were doing any other job in OGTC, I think it's quite important to be able to manipulate numbers and understand kind of what's going on. So I would advocate for maths quite a bit, even if you just end up using, so when I went to university, I did engineering, of course, and there was quite really, I like maths, so it was really interesting and like complicated, but interesting maths for me. But not that I use it every day now, but at least I feel comfortable around the numbers, and it's not sort of daunting when I have to do some sort of, thinking and processing around numbers. So yeah, I would say maths and maybe just like one science. whether it's biology, physics, what's the third one? Chemistry. You can tell I didn't like chemistry at school. Whichever one, because I think it'll give you a bit of foundation kind of understanding of how just if you're going to engineering or energy in general, it would give you a bit of either three would give you a bit of understanding on how the world works in that industry.
Excellent. So I've got an excellent question here for you, which is quite a long one, so just bear with me. So what types of engineering have you worked in, and could you expand and tell us what's involved in those roles and why you've chose the role that you have chosen?
So as a mechanical engineer, actually, to be honest, I think if you went into any engineering role, I did, so one of the, I can maybe go through a couple. Shall I do that? Is there time?
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Aye.
So one of the roles I had was as an asset integrity engineer. So it probably doesn't come off as a very common type of engineering, like you get drilling or process and things like that, or like straight mechanical. But at the time I wasn't sure, but to be honest, I did really enjoy the role. Asset integrity essentially means that in that particular role anyway, I worked in a team that was responsible for basically the entire site. So whether it was onshore or offshore, you were responsible for the integrity of every piece of equipment or pipe work or structure or just anything that was on the site basically. And subsea as well, so pipelines, that's subsea. So it gave me a really varied experience, and it was quite technical, but also involved a bit of project management because we had teams of people that worked for us at site, so we had to manage them and tell them what to do or kind of give them guidance on what they needed to do on certain days. And yeah, it was a big learning curve. I didn't know anything about asset integrity, but I had to learn about corrosion and how corrosion can affect different materials. So there was actually a bit of chemistry and mechanical, a discipline involved. One of the other roles I did was in operational excellence. So that was to do with understanding how process and people work and how you can improve that so that things can be maybe done a bit quicker and better. Can we integrate a piece of technology into the workplace that might help people be a bit more efficient? I did some training through that that looks at how we can remove waste from how you operate. So if you're doing a particular task that takes a long time, but you maybe don't really need to do it, can we actually remove that task and replace it with something else that's a bit quicker? So it's maybe not so straightforward to explain, but I really enjoyed doing that. It was not really anything to do with engineering, but it was interesting. And my role now is very good because I can look at sustainability, which is also very different, but I like it.
Excellent. So our next question is, and it'll kind of come off the back of this to a degree as well, but again, as you've worked through your career up until now, what would you say are the most important skills you have developed, or you would recommend that the skills that you use the most important skills in your job?
That's a really good question. I think when I first started in the industry, I wanted to be a people person, but I was probably a bit sort of shy. And I think I've grown in the last few years. So I think having people skills is really important. You can probably apply that to any job, but I think people skills is very important in this industry or any job. And it just helps kind of break some barriers when you join somewhere or you're starting off somewhere, to not just know what you're going to work on, but know the people so you can understand how to effectively work with them. So if you know how, what they react or don't react to, you can kind of get the decisions perhaps that you want out of them as well. So it's trying that people and influencing skills. And I think the other one would be probably, I'm trying to think. I think probably one thing I use every day is IT. So IT skills is really important, especially right now in COVID. I'm on the laptop or doing things on the laptop all the time. So I think understanding IT and how to troubleshoot is also really important.
Excellent, excellent. So I would agree. I think people skills are important, and I think for young people moving into a new role, it's sometimes when they struggle with it, it is something they'll develop as they go, just as you said, and IT is very important as well. But that brings us nicely to the next question, which I think you've probably covered a wee bit, but obviously with regards to we've all been living under COVID restrictions for a while. So I mean, how has that affected your job? And is there anything sort of around the wider aims of OTGC that's had to change under COVID?
Yeah, I think the difference would have been so the job I do is predominantly desk based anyway. I don't think that part would have changed much. I would have obviously been in the office, etc. But I think the thing that has changed is that previously, from what I understand from my colleagues, is that a lot of people did site visits. So because we work with so many different developers and they're developing technologies, they're doing studies, they're making prototypes at different places around the country or around northeast of Scotland, you had opportunities to go out and see them and meet them and see what they were building and developing, which is the one thing I've not been able to do because of COVID, understandably. So hopefully in the future that will be something I can do.
Excellent. Grant. So I've got a couple of quick fire questions. The old favourites. So, do you work long shifts? Do you have to work weekends?
Sometimes I work long shifts. I do not have to work weekends. My job is only supposed to be Monday to Friday. If there's extra work to do, if there's a deadline that I need to reach, sometimes I will have to work weekends, but it's not required.
Right. Excellent. So the next question is, what is the pay like? So you don't need to tell us exactly, but get a rough idea. We've covered average salary.
Okay, the pay is very good, and the pay is very competitive, and yeah, I have nothing bad to say about the pay.
Fantastic. So I've got a question here, which is, have you always had a passion for sustainability, or is it something that came later in your career?
I have always had a passion for sustainability, and it has also come later in my career. So the reason I'm saying that is something I've always thought about and enacted maybe more in my personal life than my work life. But in the last few years, it has become more in the front of my mind, and especially after I did some work for charity abroad and in Cambodia, and understood actually how it can affect people, the lack of sustainability, how it can affect people, and how actually sustainability can be super effective in elevating people's lives and just elevating our society or how we are operating day to day, basically. So that's why recently it's become in the front of my mind and what I'm pushing to do almost every day now.
Excellent, excellent. So I've got another question just come in here, which is, where do you see yourself going in future? And if, obviously, with your experience working in different roles, if you could maybe talk about, maybe not just now where you see yourself going, but how you see your career progressing.
It's a really good question, and I always struggle to think about. But I guess when I started in the industry, I didn't really envisage I would be doing this job that I'm doing now. It's not something I thought about at the time, and my mind has changed as well over time and evolved over time. So I see what I'm going to do in the future as something that might be quite different or could be the same. It's very much I'm open to what will come at me. When I started in the industry, I didn't think I would, I worked in Aberdeen. I didn't think I would be taking a career break or going off to do some work for a charity. That's not something I thought about. But when I did, I did do all that, and it was really amazing. And yeah, I didn't think I'd be working necessarily in sustainability, but here I am and enjoying it. So yeah, let's see what the future brings.
Excellent. I think it's fair as well, because you're never entirely sure what the future's going to bring, but it's more about being open to opportunities. And it sounds like that's what you've done through your career. So I've got another question here, which is, and if you could apply this to your time as an engineer as well as your time in your current role, that'd be great. But what is the gender split like?
In my current company organization, it's very, very good. I think it's at minimum 50-50 there, if not maybe the other way around, actually, I'm not sure. But it's very good. Previously, I would say it's not been that good. And honestly speaking, I guess, and that's why we are, a part of why you're promoting women to get into engineering, or and young people to get into engineering, is to make that better. It has been an industry where it's been more males than females previously, but I think it's getting better. Every month it's getting better, and there's heaps you can do about it, or join networks to work on that as well.
Fantastic. So I've got a question here, which is, what advice would you give your younger self?
Good question. I think I would have told my younger self to have a bit more confidence, because I probably was lacking in that when I first started working. And just, if you have a question, just ask it. I still do that. I still sometimes don't ask the question I wanted to ask, and then think back and wonder why I didn't do that. But I think it's just something you have to keep telling yourself, just like, be confident and don't, be open to challenge, but don't doubt yourselves too much, and just, and yeah, if you want something, or if you need to ask about something, you just need to go and do it.
Excellent. And it's a good message. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, because that's how we learn. So that's great. So obviously, one of the things we've got coming up, and it's been talked about quite a lot on the news and in the media, is the COP26 Environment Conference. So are you aware if OGTC are going to be involved in that? Is there anything around that you would like to talk about?
Yeah. Yes, so OGTC will be involved in COP26. I think we've asked for, I'm not sure exactly what we've asked for, but we've definitely asked to be present at COP26. We'll be running quite a lot of events, actually. So everyone can keep a lookout for them, because most of them will be available to the public. I am within the team, I'm helping in part of organising a technology showcase in COP26. So we'll be pulling together not just the technologies that we develop in OGTC, but technologies that we would develop with other organizations as well, and showcasing them so people can come and see a video, or perhaps even talk to the developer and understand what's happening, what's being developed, and why it's being developed as well. So yeah, we'll be doing quite a bit.
Excellent. So what do you think the advantages of something like the COP26 Environment Conference are? Do you think it's just good for Scotland, or further afield as well?
So it's like it's being held in Glasgow. Yeah, it's been held in Glasgow this year, but I guess it is a global conference, a global event. So the impact hopefully there will be a positive impact on the back of it in Scotland. But I suppose the purpose is to raise awareness. So there'll be a lot of things being talked about at COP26 that even I might not know about. So I'm quite interested in listening and attending and seeing what people are speaking about. It's also for knowledge sharing as well. So, for example, we're doing a technology showcase that if it's open to the public, then we're sharing knowledge on what's being developed, and people can, come in and say, okay, actually, I really like that technology. I'll keep an eye out for it. When it's ready to be, commercialized and I can use it, then I'll be in touch with the developer and stuff like that. And then also to understand what maybe there'll be some decisions being made at COP26 as well, perhaps around climate change or sustainability or environmental issues, which I think will be also very useful, especially for Scotland and the UK and globally as well. So yeah.
Excellent. So I've got a question here, which is, are there any work experience or volunteering opportunities? And is there any sort of apprenticeships or roles, ways for people to access opportunities in the OGTC?
So at OGTC, we do the opportunities that we have for young people would be is internships. So we've actually just kicked off our internship program for this year. And we also have a Kickstarter program. So we're looking this year to involve young people that are maybe leaving the age that they're leaving school to provide some work experience. So we wouldn't necessarily be the right organization for apprenticeships, but we certainly do internships and work experiences over the summer or maybe throughout the year. They are usually they should be advertised on our website, so ogtc.com. So you'd be, if you keep checking the career section when they're open for application, you can certainly submit an application.
Fantastic, fantastic. So you mentioned the use of robots. So I'm guessing you were talking about swarm robots, which I think is very cool. But are robots going to play a big part in the future of sustainability and the energy transition?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't just think so, I think they will actually be playing a very integral part. The use of robotics is not just having, a physical robot out there, but also the AI technology that goes on the back of it. So, sorry about that. So, for example, if instead of, having, I'm just going to take the offshore oil and gas industry as an example. So, for example, maybe at a platform of the future, instead of having humans out there, you maybe just have these robots that live out there and, they run, maybe like roll around the platform and do some surveillance or check things as you instruct them. And that will reduce the need for, mobilizing a helicopter full of people out there and having accommodation block, and then the waste that you produce, because there's humans out there, then you have to manage the waste from that platform back to onshore by a massive ship or a boat. So if you can take all of that away, that reduces the carbon footprint and it reduces the emissions drastically. So that's how robotics, and it's not that we would take, people away from the offshore jobs, but they would just be sitting onshore and monitoring the robot or trying to figure out, troubleshoot the robot, for example, or planning missions for the robot or doing online maintenance or something. So
yeah,
just be changing it a little bit, but I think, yeah.
Excellent. So I've got a question, which is with the energy transition and working towards net zero, do we think it's going to open up new job opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. We need people to come up with amazing ideas for clean energy technologies and technologies that use, have a unique or amazing way of creating energy from a different resource. And we need people who can work with software. So if I'm talking about robotics, then we need robotics engineers, we need software engineers, we need people who can build the robots, for example, and we need people who can build the infrastructure or the equipment that might be required for these new clean energy technologies. So yeah, we need all sorts of background, I guess, disciplines in engineering and maybe in projects, maybe in finance. How do you finance or find, do accounting for new clean tech companies, all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I don't know if that answered the question actually.
That's great. So you mentioned earlier that you work in partnership with other companies. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so OGTC is working with, so we call them partners, and quite a lot of them are the oil and gas companies that you might be familiar with around northeast of Scotland. And some of the other partners that we're working are with like universities. We do a lot of collaboration work with universities, and we also work with like national centres as well. So there's a host of national centres around the country that we are doing work with as well.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to ask you one last question, and I'm going to keep it nice and general. But so we've got young people watching here today that might be interested in a career in engineering or oil and gas or even eventually maybe a project engineer like yourself, what is the piece of advice you would, what advice would you give them? What would you say the most important piece of advice is?
I think keeping yourself open to opportunities and change. What you might choose to do now might not, for some people, it will be the same thing that they'll continue to do because you like it a lot, but for some people, you might, it might change. So I think just keeping an open mind and just and being open to change and opportunity is a good thing to have in the back of your mind.
Fantastic. So that's us come to the end of this session. I'd like to say a big thanks to Sakshi for taking her time to join us today and give us an insight into her role at the OGTC. I certainly found it interesting, and I hope you did too. We've popped a quick link for a feedback survey into the chat, and we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to complete this for us. It will help us deliver even better sessions in the future. If you need information, advice, or guidance on all things careers, you can speak to your school careers advisor. You can also find out more about careers at myworldofwork.co.uk. You can find lots of information there to help you make choices about your career. And if you need some further inspiration on what to do, there are tools there that will help you understand your strengths and lots of job profiles for you to explore. If you're interested in anything that's been talked about here today with regards to internships or projects or anything like that, you can also look at the OGTC website, which is www.ogtc.com. You can also check out apprenticeships.scot for more information on all things apprenticeships. As mentioned earlier in this video, along with other expert sessions, this will be added to the My World of Work YouTube channel under the My World of Work Live playlist. So finally, thanks again to Sakshi for joining us, and thank you to you for joining the session. Take care and have a lovely day.